only Mr. Roger Stone, the legend of American, is a legendary American political operative. So let's clap it up for him. But for those of you who don't know him, he's a seasoned political operative with over 40 years of experience. Clap it up for 40 years. He's been involved in 9 presidential campaigns, served as a senior campaign aide to 3 Republican presidents, and he's been on Fox News and some of our favorites, InfoWars! Like Fox News. But he also has some credit because he was banned by CNN and MSNBC. Are we okay with that? Are we okay? But he is an absolute legend. And I think there's no better way to kind of learn about Roger Stone than by watching this Netflix. He has a new Netflix original series, documentary, about him. And in this video, you're going to see, because I mean that intro is obviously boring. I know, Mr. Stone, you're not about boring. So this is amazing, and I think everybody needs to see this and watch this documentary.
He loves the game. He has fun with it, and he's very good at it. Agent provocateur. Political strategist, controversial as we can get.
An incredible capacity for treachery. Win at all costs mentality.
When people think of Washington corruption, they think of Roger Stone.
Those who say I have no soul, those who say I have no principles, are losers. Those are bitter losers.
There's really nobody quite like Roger Stone.
The Nixon tattoo is really all you need to know about Roger. He created the modern sleazeball lobbyist.
Washington's been worse for it ever since.
Stone's rule, it is better to be infamous than never be famous at all.
The swinger scandal happened.
My private life is nobody's business.
Got chased out of Washington.
He's looking to see if he can find an angle.
I was like a jockey looking for a horse. You can't win the race if you don't have a horse.
Roger saw something that nobody else saw back in the early 80s.
I suggested that Trump should explore a bid for the presidency.
He created Donald Trump as a political figure.
What have I lied about?
Roger, you can't just say that.
You have to be outrageous to get noticed.
America may be collapsing, but Roger Stone is determined to win.
I revel in your hatred, because if I weren't effective, you wouldn't hate me.
All right, let's clap it up! And let's welcome the one, the only Roger Stone!
Hi, I'm a hard act to follow. Thank you for that, and I apologize for being a bit tardy. It is great to be with you because, of course, I have my own long-time sentimental attachment to the College Republicans. I was the chairman of the District of Columbia Federation of College Republican Clubs. I was the vice chairman of the George Washington University chapter of College Republicans. It was there that I met Paul Manafort, who would later manage Donald Trump's campaign, and the late John Terry Dolan, the founder of MCPAC, a legendary conservative. And I, of course, as most college Republicans, I went on to Young Republicans. And in Young Republicans, I think it would be fair to say that sometimes the right hand doesn't know what the far right hand is doing. There were no liberals or moderates. We had already pounded them into dust. So I feel very much at home, and I commend your activism in College Republicans because I remember what my campus was like and how I was constantly being pissed on and scorned by snobby, elitist, snot-nosed liberal punks from wealthy families. So I know what you're doing takes courage, and I commend you for it. We are in an extraordinarily improbable place in time, where speaking as someone with great sentimental attachment to the Republican Party, the party of Barry Goldwater, the party of Ronald Reagan, the party of minimal regulation of our private lives, low taxes, smaller, more economic, less intrusive government, a national defense that was muscular and so strong that nobody would screw with us. Peace through strength. The bedrock principle of Dwight Eisenhower, of Barry Goldwater. And somewhere along the way, that party, in my view, got hijacked. And it got hijacked by its Wall Street wing and its K Street wing and its insider wing. And before long, that party began to look almost identical to the other party. Endless war, erosion of our civil liberties, reading our email, listening to our phone calls, more debt, more spending, more borrowing, which you and your children will pay off, an immigration system that by anybody's definition is just broken. The borders are porous in some places. We are bringing in bad people with the good. It's not racist to say if 100,000 young Syrian men want to come here, want to immigrate here, that some subset of them, 10, 25, 1, might be a terrorist. The chances that some of them are criminals should at least be examined. But when we say that, they say to us, oh, you're racist, you're bigoted. No, but we have a broken system and it needs to be fixed. And then lastly, a foreign policy in which we allow our strength to atrophy, but at the same time we go around the world looking for trouble to stick our nose in, like, say, Libya, and then when we decide to assert regime change, removing a dictator who had switched to our side, who was sharing his intelligence on Al-Qaeda and terrorists, whose children, one of his kids was actually going to college in this country. He had renounced his nuclear ambitions. He was going to be, I believe, would have paid hundreds of millions in his Lockerbie escapade. I'm not saying he was a good guy, but in Libya, under Gaddafi, women could own property, women could go to college, women could go to grad school, women could move around the country without the permission of their husbands, women could appear in public, without a veil, women could drive a car, women could travel across the country, and for those actions today, a woman would be stoned to death. Thank you, Hillary Clinton and Huma Abedin. So, the party got hijacked, and we really became indistinguishable. And whether it was Bush, Clinton, Bush, or Obama, everything fundamentally remained the same. We nominated Mitt Romney, a man who is not a conservative, never was, didn't even know how to act and sound like one. No one would ever say I'm severely conservative. That gives the game away, as if it's a disease. Wasn't a Republican until right up to the time that he ran for governor as a Republican. Ran against Teddy Kennedy for the U.S. Senate to Teddy's left. I didn't know there was any room over there. To Teddy's left on gay marriage at the time, and on abortion, even supporting partial birth abortion, that radical. And that was kind of it for me. I said, well, the party has been captured, and in all honesty, I briefly changed my registration to the Libertarian Party. They're crazy too. I met a lot of really good people. We succeeded in getting Governor Gary Johnson 4 years ago on the ballot in 48 states. I think the debate would have been richer with the inclusion of the minor party candidates, including Neil Stein, who I think's a whack job, because more choice is better. And then came Donald Trump. And the hostile takeover of the Bush-controlled neocon party right under from their very noses, and a rebirth of the party of Goldwater and Reagan, and maybe a party that breaks the link of interventionism that I think has brought the country to its knees in so many ways. Now, you of course will say, well, what about Syria? This is a complicated question for me. I must tell you that on Friday I was supposed to tape Meet the Press in Washington for the following Sunday, it would have been last Sunday. And for the first time in my long career, I canceled because in all honesty I did not know what I was going to say. I find circumstances around this gas attack to be questionable. I like to be guided by logic, and since Assad reached an international agreement giving up his chemical weapons with the Obama-Kerry administration, and since the Russians certified the integrity of this agreement, and since Assad is many things, but stupid is not one of them, he would have to know the international community would come down on him if he used chemical weapons against his own people. It's not logical, and I'm still examining the possibilities of a false flag. Now, people will say, oh, Stone, you're a conspiracy theorist. The Russians helped Donald Trump. There's a fucking conspiracy theory for you. A Democratic Party-led, mainstream media-fed conspiracy theory of the worst kind. They can't admit they nominated an old, tired, sick, corrupt candidate who was out of ideas and out of energy, and that per neocon prescription, the promise of a no-fly zone in Syria. How's that? An engraved invitation to World War III. Send it to the Russians. And that maybe, just maybe, Donald Trump has the stones to do what Nixon and Brezhnev did. Negotiate a limitation in nuclear warheads. Brezhnev murdered people too. But Trump would like to try negotiation in détente before we gin up World War III over Syria. Syria, where Assad finances Hezbollah and Hamas, propped up by the Russians, who are not our friends, but could be our partners for peace under the right circumstances. And on the other side, it's far more complicated than just saying it's ISIS. It's 100 terrorist extremist subsets, sects, and while ISIS may be dominant, or at least may be the cohesive force, this is a force for evil of Islamic jihadists backed up by the Saudis, who, ladies and gentlemen, financed the attack on this country on 9/11 and are fighting our Congress and our courts because they're busted and they don't want to pay. The families in New York who lost their loved ones in an act of murder. Is this worth a single American life? Is this worth a single drop, is this worth a single borrowed American dollar? Because when we bombed Libya, we had to go borrow $1 billion to pay for the bombs. Look it up. Just under. Does this make any sense at all? No. So, I think our president is at a crucial juncture. The strike, I can see, was irresistible from the point of a international geopolitical move that sent the North Koreans a strong message, that sent the Iranians a strong message that, well, the Chinese got a ringside seat. That no longer are we going to have a president who draws a line in the sand and then sits back helplessly and watches our adversaries step over it. That Donald Trump is not a cream puff, and he's not a pushover. And if they think that he is not up to this job, they don't know him as I know him. I've known him 40 years. This is the toughest human being I have ever met. When he is focused on a goal, and I mean this positively, he's an incredibly stubborn individual. And he will not be deterred. And he's committed to make the country great again, and I think he's finished with adventurism. So I'm going to support the strike, despite my reservations. I don't think it's going to change the balance of power in Syria. Interesting that we told the Russians in advance so they could remove their personnel and not get killed. So we're not looking for World War III. But to send 150,000 troops, as Mr. General McMaster is advocating, is a violation of Trumpism. He is it would be the morphing into Jeb Bush, or worse, George W. The globalists and the neocons would have hijacked our presidency, the presidency that you and I and so many worked so hard to achieve. So I have rejoined the Republican Party, the party of Lincoln, the party of Goldwater, the party of civil rights. It's time to regain our birthright as the party of civil rights. And I'll tell you, there's no better place than reform of our federal drug laws and our state drug laws, which are racist and discriminatory. Donald Trump has written about his skepticism on the war on drugs. It's a multi-billion-dollar failure. We're building prisons and rehabilitating no one. We're turning out a few hardened criminals. It's costing the taxpayers a fortune. It's time to address drug addiction as a public health problem, not a crime problem. It's a unique opportunity. I'm sure Attorney General Sessions would disagree with me, but he's wrong. And to say that, well, we're for states' rights. We're for states' rights when it comes to transgendered bathrooms. We're for states' rights when it comes to abortion. We're for states' rights when it comes to medicinal marijuana. But if you're one of the 8 states that have approved recreational marijuana, we're going to come and bust you. There's no consistency. The process by which recreational marijuana has been approved is just as stringent and difficult and identical to the process in which medicinal marijuana is sold. And candidate Trump said, it's up to the states. For medicine, if it helps some people, yes, it's up to the states. That was music to my ears. I know lots of younger voters, lots of people who may have been leaning to Gary Johnson, switched to Trump at the end. Governor Johnson's a good man and a friend of mine. I frankly think he was a better candidate 4 years ago than in the recent race. But he's an accomplished governor of New Mexico, where he created more jobs than Rick Perry and Mitt Romney together as governor. And he should have been admitted to the debates in both races, just on the basis of fair play and equal access. The measure, just to cover this, should not be, well, where are you in the polls? You have to poll a certain percentage to get in the debates. That's a phony argument. That was invented by the Republican and Democratic national chairman over a martini, I guarantee you. Because it's the chicken and egg. If you can't get in the debate, you can't move up in the polls. If you can't move up in the polls, you can't get in the debate. Voila. No, the measure should be, how many states are you on the ballot in? If it's more states than would total 270 electoral votes, and therefore your election is theoretically, legally possible, you should be in the debate. Anyway, we will see what happens here. I am confident that Trumpism will survive. Donald Trump is been underestimated his entire life. He's not a polished politician. He's not working off talking points or polling or focus groups or round tables. He speaks from the gut, from the heart. It doesn't always come out exactly right, but you always know exactly what he means. He's not polished, but he is eloquent. In that he speaks the language of average Americans, the way people talk around the dinner table. He's not fancy. Having hung out with him, I can tell you, he's not a snob. There's nothing stuffy or starchy about him. He's easy to talk to. He's very approachable. He loves a good cheeseburger. He has a wicked sense of humor, particularly a self-deprecating sense of humor, which is kind of surprising. Ignorant, vulgar, crude, an ignoramus. That's what they said about Andrew Jackson. An egomaniac, a self-promoter, a lightweight, a braggart. That's what they said about Theodore Roosevelt. Donald Trump could be one of our greatest presidents. He has the size. I don't mean physical size. I mean the command presence, the stature. It's more than charisma. It's hard to convey, but it's a power to communicate. He has the independence, because the way this election was financed, he doesn't owe anybody anything. No special industry, no lobbyist, no insider. He's his own man. He can do what's best for the country, and that has virtually never happened in modern times. He's courageous. He's bold. He's capable of seeing the big picture. His enemies are extremely well entrenched. The establishment, the two-party duopoly, those who run this country into the ground, have invented the Russian collusion meme, which is, in fact, the brainchild of John Podesta, a brilliant move to divert public attention to the fact that, yeah, there is a presidential candidate in bed with Putin, but it's Hillary Clinton. Because John and Tony Podesta have made millions in the bank deal, the uranium deal, the gas company deal. They are dealing with the oligarchs who are the inner circle of Putin. And we're going to learn that the Democrats' allies in the intelligence community began an investigation on the basis of a Hillary Clinton press release. In essence, there's no evidence of Russian collusion. This has been less than smoke and no fire. Yeah, they keep throwing names out, but evidence. On January 20th, Inauguration Day, the New York Times had a page one story that said, wiretap data utilized in probe of Trump associates. The story went on to say that intelligence service sources told the New York Times that they were in possession of emails and financial records between Trump associates and the Russians. And on January, I believe it's the 30th, they had a follow-up story in which they added transcripts of intercept phone calls. So we have wiretapping. What's the probable cause? What did they go to a judge with and say, we want to wiretap Roger Stone and Paul Manafort and others, and Donald Trump? Or inadvertently, Donald Trump. But I have no doubt when a bunch of fake news sites came out a few weeks ago with essentially a bogus story saying that I had an exchange with Guccifer 2.0 on Twitter, and that he was a Russian asset, and that somehow proved Russian collusion to help Trump. I pointed out that that inference was false based on the timing. It happens long after the hacking of the DNC documents, and it's our only communication. And the content, which I've completely released, it's benign. If you're going to engage in espionage, who would do it on Twitter? And the circumstances. I don't concede, first of all, that he's a Russian asset. We've learned the hard way that just because the intelligence agencies say something is true does not necessarily mean it's true. They said we had weapons of mass destruction, and Hussein had them. They said there was no rendition of terrorists through third-party countries who used torture. That was a lie. They said Benghazi was the result, it was a mob ginned up by an anti-Islamic video in Turkey. That's a lie. They have been consistent through our more recent history, whether it was Iran-Contra or Vietnam or the Kennedy assassination. They've lied about many things. So I don't concede this. If you go online, there are many theories about Guccifer 2.0, and the intelligence services tell you, well, it's our assessment that he's a Russian agent. Ladies and germs, when they say assessment, that's no joke. Ladies and germs there was a famous comedian named Milton Berle long before your time, and he started the show by saying that. Anyway, there's no evidence, there's no there in this entire meme, which means that the Russian collusion that the Democrats used as their legal rationale for surveilling Trump and his associates has just fallen apart. That means they did it for entirely political purposes. Ladies and gentlemen, Watergate times 10. Spying on the president-elect. And the FBI director and the NSA director, Admiral Rogers, went before the Intelligence Committee and they said, no, there was no surveillance of Trump Tower. No, that's perjury. So, the Democrats have a real problem. They're busted. Susan Rice was utilizing the spy services to spy on President-elect Trump, and before that, candidate Trump. And she has to be prosecuted. It's against the law. The unmasking of these names is against the law. Who else knew? Did Valerie Jarrett know? Did the president know? There's only one way to find out. The Attorney General, Mr. Sessions, needs to convene a grand jury and start calling people. Jarrett, Rice, Barack Obama. What was it they told us in Watergate? No person is above the law. They said it endlessly. Well, they're right. It's time now for the president to be deposed. This is the real scandal. There is no Russian collusion scandal. Adam Schiff and Senator Mark Warner, what a couple of demagogues, red baiting, fear-mongering, slander. It's the new McCarthyism. If you're not for war with Russia, well, you must be a traitor to the United States. And they conflate dates. They accuse me of direct contact with Assange as if that would be a crime, which it wouldn't be since he doesn't work for the Russians, but I didn't have any anyway. It's a smear. It's designed to get the following headline. Trump associate admits exchange with Russian hacker. Misleading. Agitprop. Put together by dipshits like David Brock and other leftist fanatics. it is now, I think, important to tell you what I see as the greatest challenge going forward. I think that one of the most important themes of my book, Making the President 2016, which I commend to you, and I'd be happy to sign for you, is that the technological development of the majority of Americans no longer getting their news from the television set, but getting their news on their handheld device, or their iPad, or even on the PC. And that those watching habits open the door to the internet, because let's say you're a CNN watcher, you used to watch it on the box at home, now you're watching it on your phone, you got to go to the internet to get there, and when you get to the internet, you know what you find out? It's easy. Infowars.com is a hell of a lot better than CNN when it comes to being objective. When it comes to being unbiased. There's real journalism going on there. CNN is a bunch of elitist pukes spitting up the same false pablum again and again and again. So that gave birth to a vibrant, robust, alternative media. If you don't like the New York Times, or you don't like CNN, or you don't like CBS, you can go someplace else, someplace better, and find out what's really happening. And more Americans did. And it made for the election of Donald Trump. Now, the barons of Google and Facebook, who were so close to the Obama administration, who were so supportive of Hillary, here's an undisputed fact. When the Trump campaign put out a press release in the presidential campaign, Google marked it as promotion. And when Hillary Clinton put out a press release, Google marked it as update. That designation is worth literally millions of more opens. Why would they do that? Why were they screwing with Trump's algorithms to limit his reach in Twitter and Facebook and other conservative and Republican-oriented outlets, although to a limited degree. But more importantly, why now, post-election, suddenly we're using the fake argument of fake news, the phony argument of fake news, to limit the reach of InfoWars and Daily Caller and Breitbart and StoneColdTruth.com and StoneZone.com and Town Hall and so many other great conservative sites. We see this happening. We're slowly being choked. It is a violation of the antitrust laws. It's a monopoly. It is going to either be fought back in the Congress or by an antitrust action by the Trump administration or in the courts. But you cannot put the toothpaste of truth back into the tube. And the American people have figured out that the Bushes were full of shit, that they and their cronies lined their pockets and became very wealthy while this country got poorer. They crashed our economy. They forced us into a war where we had no national interest. And then they tried to give us Jeb. In the debates, when somebody had the audacity to say that George W. kept us safe, are they crazy? 9/11 happened on his watch. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement had multiple complaints about strange Arabic men training at a flight school in Sarasota. Some of them would end up being among the terrorists. We were even told that they had an avid interest in learning how to take off, but they weren't too interested in how to land. For any of you who would like the crude truth about the Bush crime family, this is the Bible. Now, I acknowledge a great book by Russ Baker. I acknowledge a great book by Kitty Kelly. But if you want to know how epically corrupt this family is, how they made the family money selling armaments and financing the purchase of armaments for the Nazis, how they funded mass sterilization of the underclasses in the 1930s in this country. How George H.W. Bush, working with Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton, trafficked millions of dollars of cocaine into the United States to be sold to finance the Nicaraguan fight against the communist governments, which was illegal because the Congress had cut off funding. And you'll learn about Jeb's days as a drug dealer here in Miami. Anyway, I commend it to you, and it will be out in paperback with 2 new chapters on George P. Bush, the next young criminal from the House of Bush. It has been retitled The Bush Crime Family. So I will give anybody who's here today a 50% price off if you contact us upon publication. Anyway, I am delighted to be with you and have a chance to talk about what I see are the struggles and the future. I'm going to take a few questions, and whenever you guys want to cut it off, I'll sign some books, but go ahead.
Thank you for coming first.
If somebody could acquire me a bottle of water, I would be most grateful.
So repeatedly you've said that there's no actual proof of Russian meddling, and while I agree that I'm a big believer in the law and that we have a grand jury, you follow the process. You're not hung until you've been found guilty.
Yes.
But my question is this, especially today, and it was about an hour ago, the Washington Post came out and said the FBI obtained a secret court order last summer to monitor Trump advisor Carter Page on probe of campaign's Russian ties.
Yes.
So my question is 2 parts. One,
that's the same court order in which I'm surveilled. Go ahead.
So, first part is, in order to go in front of court, there would need to be substantial probable cause.
No, not in front of the FISA court.
So my question is, since there's been enough evidence presented repeatedly, and we're seeing this evidence come forward, do you believe that an independent commission should be created that is not Republican and that is not Democratic and that is not the Department of Justice, due to the fact that Jeff Sessions, as you said yourself, can be an idiot at times? And secondly, if it is then proven that Donald Trump and any of his campaign people did collude, communicate, or in any manner attempt to sway the election, do you believe that invalidates the legitimacy of his presidency and he should either resign or be impeached? Because that is a very serious concern.
Yes, all right, let me address it. Your premise that evidence had to be shown to a court to get these taps is not accurate if they went to the super secret FISA court. The FISA court has no requirement of evidence or probable cause. And the government gets 99% of its requests from the FISA court. Devin Nunes said today that Page and Manafort and Stone were surveilled and it was legal. He didn't say, and that story said the courts approved, but it didn't say which court approved. So we don't know that there's probable cause. Actually, I do know, because I've been tapped or surveilled, and I know what's in my email and my texts and my phone calls. A lot of funky shit, but no Russians. a lot of perfectly legal deep politics and exchanges with reporters and my wife and my grandchildren and my children, but no treason. They can say I'm a dirty trickster, but I'll tell you one trick that's not in my bag. Treason. So, secondarily, no evidence is coming forward. We've seen no evidence. The New York Times said on the 20th, email records, financial records, and then later phone intercepts. I'm ready. Let's hear it. Let's see them. Produce them. It's fine for Adam Schiff and the Democrats on the House Intelligence Committee. Let me tell you something. There's nothing better than turning on the TV and seeing some freshman congressman kicking your balls around like a football in a public session and saying things that are patently not true or half-truths or reversing the order that things happen, conflating dates to make things appear to be true that are not, and taking the intelligence service's word for everything because they have an assessment. What did I say earlier? When they say assessment, it means they don't know shit. They have a theory. And the theory always fits their geopolitical view of things. So, yeah, if there were Russian collusion, but Hillary's collusion with the Russians should be examined by the same investigation. Podesta should be asked about the bank stock and the gas deal. In fact, it's kind of interesting that we're in the Donna Shalala building. She served in an administration. Secretary Shalala served in an administration which sold American military targeting secrets to the Chinese and technology to the Russians in return for campaign contributions. It's in my book, The Clintons' War on Women. That's treason. Why didn't Bill go down for that, Secretary Shalala? So, I argue the premise of your question, yeah, if you come up with that proof, but we need real proof of espionage. Jeff Sessions,
What would he prove to you? Emails, conversations?
something that is damning, something that is not, that's more than a social or an inadvertent contact. So Senator Sessions, who I disagree with on marijuana, but I think he's a person of goodwill. He's just wrong about that issue. He's from the South. He said, and you may have seen the quote, he says, good people don't smoke marijuana. No. No, sick people smoke marijuana. Kids with epilepsy utilize THC. So it's an honest disagreement. In terms of a way to probe this, first of all, I have made it clear in my letter to Chairman Nunes, in my letter to the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, said that I want to testify, don't require a subpoena. I'm not asking for immunity, but I want it to be in public. I was slimed in public. I was defamed in public. I should have a chance to answer in public, and I hear nothing. And I'm ready as soon as possible. If I expect that the congressional investigation is not the best way to look at this, but the House committee, the Senate committee should also examine what Clinton was doing with the Russians and what Susan Rice was doing with unmasking and how much we knew about the chatter at Trump Tower. I'd like them to ask about Operation Dragnet because I think, in fact, the government started surveilling certain Americans through a surveillance program that was revealed in the federal courts in Arizona, and that Trump is among those who I think was surveilled, meaning they record your conversations and they just file them away for future use. At Mar-a-Lago, at Trump Tower, at his apartment, some of his golf clubs. So I'm not sure a congressional committee, just doesn't become a political circus with both sides trying to score and not getting to what we have. A special prosecutor, probably a good idea, only because of Attorney General Sessions' intercessions with the Russian ambassador. He's a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. We don't know what was discussed. It's not evidence of a collusion or a crime, but it's a fact. So, yeah, I think a special prosecutor, one with a real reputation of not being in the tank for anybody, think long and hard about who that is. We've had too many special prosecutors who end up finding nothing because they're compromised one way or another. I don't think a special commission, that too could become a political football. But you need more fire than we have today to justify that. I guess I'm hopeful that we'll learn something in these hearings, but here's my obvious question. If Donald Trump is soft on the Russians, if he's soft on Putin, why did he just kick him in the balls? Kind of shows that this whole narrative makes no sense. Donald Trump knows the Russian system is rotten. He knows what the Russian gulag is. He understands that Putin is a ex-KGB and probably a killer, definitely a killer. He knows that they oppress gays and Christians and Jews and women. I don't think he has any illusions about what he's dealing with, but he's also a good enough businessman to know that you don't aggravate and inflame somebody before you sit down with them, which is why he wouldn't denounce him during the campaign. And, you know, actions are more important than words. We just blew their buddy's air base, which I think is supposedly crucial to their air defense, or their air sorties, out of the water. So I'm anxious to get it resolved. Another question.
I've heard that the U.S. wants to have some sort of involvement with North Korea, some kind of little whispers or rumors of some kind of toppling. What do you know about that?
Well, I mean, I think the problem here is you're dealing with an adversary that has no rationality. You've got a rogue leader here who would have no problem killing hundreds, if not millions, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of his own countrymen, who at point murders his own relatives. I mean, he's clearly unstable. He cannot be allowed to get the ability to incinerate us. Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton sure did slow him down. He keeps insisting that he doesn't have nuclear ambitions for the purposes of a weapon. We're not that stupid. I do think Trump will take unilateral action if he has to. The Israelis might help, but they kind of have their own issues. But Trump's not going to let them achieve the ability to have us in some kind of nuclear blackmail. I don't know what will be beyond that. That's just my view.
You think the Syria thing is like the first domino that could lead to that kind of?
No, but I think it's a strong signal that says to them, look, don't push us, because if you try to, it's going to end up not well. So I think it's an important symbol. We'd rather talk them out of igniting World War III if we can. In this case, though, you know, diplomacy is hard with people who are crazy. You can negotiate with people who are sane, maybe hard, but sane. It's hard to, I mean, this guy just seems to be nuts. The other point I would make, and this is, I think, very important. I saw a picture the other day of the North Korean dictator with all of his generals, and these guys are all lined up. And the common thing that's so annoying is that all of their sleeves are like this. Why can these people get no decent tailoring? When you're me, you have to go on Twitter every day and Facebook and see this torrent of bot-generated hate directed at me by David Brock and Soros and all these loser dipshits that had such a financial advantage. The mainstream media in the tank, the new media barons in Silicon in the tank for Hillary. She spends $2 billion. Donald Trump, never been through a campaign in his life, spends $275 million, and they lost. But they just heap invective on me constantly. They want to, you know, kill my wife, kill my family, kill my dogs. They want me to rot in prison for the rest of my life. Boy, are they going to be disappointed. And you put up with this. But what really bothered me was some ridiculous story in New York Magazine criticizing my personal style and my clothing. Now that pissed me off. Anyway, another question. Yes, sir.
What is the deep state and how long has it been around for in the United States?
Say that again?
What is the deep state and how long has it been around in the United States?
The deep state is a title that that refers to what I think President Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex. It's the careerists at the Central Intelligence Agency and the other 17 intelligence agencies, and some careerists at the FBI, and careerists at the Pentagon, and the generals at the Pentagon, and the defense contractors and the aerospace contractors that they eat thick steaks and big martinis with in Washington, who love war because it's very profitable. And they have been infected since the Bush days, even the latter days of Reagan, with neocons, with people who are, interventionists. And it doesn't really matter who the president is, they pretty much stay in place. Now, that said, the only person at the Central Intelligence Agency today who we know to be loyal to President Donald Trump is the director, because nobody else has been appointed. The whole second line of Obama-appointed bureaucrats, or I should say deep staters, who are leaking against General Flynn, leaking against Roger Stone, leaking against Carter Page, they're still in place. Their motive? Hillary promised them a war in Syria, an expansion of the proxy war, a no-fly zone, as we said earlier, World War III. Very profitable for some. And that's their motive. They have been trying to destabilize and delegitimize Trump. And if you stop and think about it, after he won his historic victory, we had the argument about the popular vote. Well, I'm sorry you experienced Democratic politicians who run presidential campaigns. We don't elect presidents by the popular vote. If you didn't calibrate your campaign to an electoral victory, that's a strategic on your part. And then it was the recount. Remember, we're going to recount Wisconsin and Michigan. These are the people who said there's no vote stealing a few months before. And then when that failed, John Podesta wanted the intelligence services to give a briefing to the electors about Russian collusion. Boy, that would have been a doozy, because they didn't know anything more then than they know now, which is to say nothing. Nothing is proven. We don't know that they had probable cause. I know they don't in my case. So we kind of come back to the same place. Another question. Yes, well, somebody who has not asked a question. Sir.
You were saying how basically Donald Trump wants to shake up the party and basically go back to the days of maybe Barry Goldwater and such. Now, my question for you is this. Currently the Chief of Staff to the President of the United States is one of the previous graduate of the University of Miami. But my question for you is that he's the representation of the establishment. He was the chairman of the RNC, the same position George W. Bush, which you've been stating frequently. He is a member of the establishment. How are you going to shake up the party and move the party towards your direction if you literally have the representation of the establishment being the forebearer, the very contact to your office?
Exactly the question I've been asking myself. Again, I've seen White House staffs that had wings and factions and so on. He's an improbable and unlikely choice. I blame him for the health care fiasco. We could have had a better bill. This bill was written by lobbyist John Boehner, handed to Paul Ryan, who handed it to Reince Priebus, who handed it to the president, and said, "Oh, Mr. President, look at this great bill." Could have done better. Instead of attacking the Freedom Caucus, invite them in for a conference on their ideas for a better bill. Maybe even start with Rand Paul's bill, not as the final bill, but a starting place. Attacking the Freedom Caucus is attacking your natural allies. I blame Priebus for this fiasco. Steve Bannon's a good man, but he's under siege. He is being attacked by some of the establishmentarians in the Trump administration for the failure of the travel ban to take flight, the failure of the health care bill, and now many libertarians upset with him about the strike in Syria. Many of my friends who are Trump supporters are borderline right now. They want to see if we're going to go to a full-fledged war. That will be it for them. Some have already departed and saying, "Well, you fooled me. Trump is an interventionist." I hope that that's wrong. I believe it will be proven to be wrong. I don't know what Priebus's longevity will be, but I do think that when you have a White House staff which is peopled with these establishment Republicans who weren't for you for the nomination who may have been for you in name only in the general election, and some of whom actually openly or quietly supported Hillary, because she's seen as transactional by the Republican lobbyists who are close to the leadership, who are all about making a living and not about the correctness of the policies they push. Basically, maggots. And when that's your White House staff, don't be surprised when it leaks. When the Washington Post quotes a White House staffer as saying the president's like a clueless child, and other things that denigrate the president. If the president gives you a White House job, it's the greatest political job you can have, particularly for someone who's young, in the beginning of their career. You owe your loyalty and your confidentiality to the president. I understand leaking. I understand strategic leaking with a purpose within the larger game of defeating Democrats and achieving your policy goals and changing the country. But leaking to suck up to reporters and pretend to be their friend, or to aggrandize your own power within the administration at the expense of the president, no, that's not the kind of leaking we're talking about here. So I think there will be changes. I think that Sean Spicer does not serve the president well. He tries hard. He has another misstep today. He is not going to make the International Stone Zone best dressed list anytime soon. Anyway, another question.
Actually, we do have to kind of wrap it up.
All right, one more?
We can do one more.
One more.
Thank you for coming, first of all. So you already kind of touched on my question, but it deals with Iran-Contra. And just kind of the backstory, I know 138 Reagan administration officials were either indicted, convicted, or subject of a major investigation. Do you think President Reagan knew what was happening, and knew that his administration was acting in opposition to the Poland Amendment, and do you think the CIA helped the Contras traffic cocaine in the United States?
I covered this very extensively in both my book on the Clintons and my book on the Bushes, and I commend them to you, but to give you the short answer. This is the brainchild of William Bill Casey, the CIA director, and Vice President George Bush, who is the actual active chairman of the secret action group to move the cocaine through Mena, Arkansas. The Central Intelligence Agency first tries to move the cocaine through Louisiana using rural secret airstrips, but the Louisiana State Police figure it out, and the governor goes to the president and says, "You see here, this is illegal. You're not doing this in Louisiana," so they have to leave. Then they try Texas, but the Texas Rangers figure it out, and the governor again of Texas goes to the feds and says, you're going to get caught. You can't do this in Texas. And then they find a pliable governor who's happy to take his cut, William Jefferson Clinton. And he's getting a piece of the action at Mena through a local guy named Dan Lassiter. Later he gets busted and goes to jail on a more minor drug offense. The purpose is to bring the cocaine into the United States. It gets trafficked as far as LA. Freeway Ricky Ross is selling stuff that's coming into the country through Mena. It's an ingenious idea because you see, when you are the cops, you can bust people with drugs, take the drugs. Now you have found money. Sell the drugs, take the money, fund the Contras. Brilliant. And they did it. I don't think Reagan knew. I think Casey said, "Mr. President, don't worry, we're taking care of the Contras." Ollie North and the Vice President and I had it all worked out. Did he know they were trafficking drugs? I sincerely doubt it. Here's the kicker. When a special prosecutor was appointed to look into this, Mr. Walsh, Vice President George Bush refused to be questioned, refused to turn over any documents, and refused to cooperate in any way. You won't find that in any biography of George Bush.